Donald Trump's recent speech in Atlanta, Georgia, was nothing short of a catastrophe. The former president, whose public appearances have long been spectacles, found himself delivering a rambling and incoherent address to a dwindling audience at the Cobb Performing Arts Center. With a capacity to hold just 2,750 people, even this relatively modest venue proved too much for Trump to fill. As the night progressed, the atmosphere shifted from lukewarm support to outright disinterest, culminating in a humiliating scene. Audience members, visibly unimpressed by the disjointed speech, began to leave in droves. Trump's performance, marred by broken teleprompters, incoherent thoughts, and bizarre tangents, was emblematic of a political figure rapidly losing his grip on both his rhetoric and his audience. This wasn't just a bad night for Trump. It was a glaring sign of the former president's diminishing appeal, even in traditionally friendly territories. What should have been a rallying cry for his base became a cautionary tale about a leader increasingly out of touch with his supporters. From nonsensical praise for Marjorie Taylor Greene to a baffling warning about the dangers of hydrogen cars, Trump's speech was filled with moments that left both the audience and political commentators scratching their heads. 1. The embarrassing venue exodus. From the beginning, the mood at the Cobb Performing Arts Center was tense. Although the venue was smaller compared to the massive arenas Trump once packed, it still failed to attract a full house. Audience members who had gathered to hear the former president speak were met with a spectacle they likely did not expect. A man struggling to complete coherent sentences, frequently losing track of his thoughts, and spiraling into incoherent tangents. As Trump began speaking, it was clear that the night would not go as planned. Within minutes, viewers noticed something unsettling. Attendees were standing up and walking out. For a man who has long prided himself on his ability to draw and maintain large crowds, this mass exodus was a public relations disaster. The stark reality of Trump's shrinking influence was palpable. At the height of his presidency, his rallies were characterized by energy, fervor, and an almost cult-like devotion. In Atlanta, however, the energy was noticeably absent, replaced by an awkward silence punctuated by the shuffle of people leaving their seats. For every cheer or clapping sound, there seemed to be twice as many yawns or murmurs of disappointment. Trump's disjointed delivery likely played a huge role in the audience's decision to leave. His once sharp rhetoric, now replaced by muddled phrases and unfinished thoughts, has begun to alienate even his most dedicated followers. The teleprompter failed multiple times during the speech, and while technical difficulties are not uncommon, Trump's inability to recover from them was glaring. At one point, he bizarrely ranted about the teleprompter kicking back, further confusing his audience. 2. The Pennsylvania disaster. A prelude to Atlanta. Atlanta wasn't Trump's only recent flop. Just a day before, Trump spoke in Oaks, Pennsylvania, where the conditions for the audience were outright dangerous. The former president took the stage in a venue with no air conditioning, despite the sweltering heat. As he droned on, audience members began to faint and collapse, and instead of stopping to address the situation, Trump reportedly asked for music to be played so he could dance. This incident highlighted the growing absurdity of Trump's public appearances. What was once seen as part of his larger-than-life persona, his ability to riff and improvise, has now become a liability. Instead of reading the room and showing concern for his audience, Trump appeared more interested in entertaining himself, oblivious to the discomfort and danger faced by the people who had come to see him. The Pennsylvania disaster set the stage for what was to come in Atlanta. If Trump's speech in Oaks was marked by indifference to his audience's well-being, his performance in Atlanta was defined by his inability to connect with them at all. 3. Incoherent ramblings and bizarre claims. As Trump's speech in Atlanta unfolded, it became increasingly clear that the former president was struggling to stay on message. His thoughts were scattered, and he frequently veered off into tangents that left many wondering if he was fully aware of what he was saying. One of the most baffling moments came when Trump claimed credit for inventing the term caravan to describe groups of migrants traveling to the U.S. border. "I made up that name," Trump boasted, as if this piece of linguistic trivia would somehow resonate with the audience. He also went on a strange rant about hydrogen-powered cars, warning that they are so dangerous that if they explode, a person would become unrecognizable. Trump painted a graphic picture of someone's wife being unable to identify her husband after such an explosion, even though hydrogen cars are considered one of the future's cleanest and safest technologies. This bizarre aside was met with confusion, and many in the audience likely wondered why the former president was talking about this at all. For Marjorie Taylor Greene's bizarre elevation, a recurring theme in Trump's Atlanta speech was his effusive praise for controversial Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Trump repeatedly referred to Greene as highly respected and smart, despite her reputation for embracing conspiracy theories and her history of inflammatory rhetoric. "Marjorie, you knock your competitors on their ass," Trump declared, as if trying to evoke some sort of fighter spirit. However, Greene's controversial image doesn't align with traditional notions of respect or intelligence, making Trump's praise seem hollow and disingenuous. Greene's involvement in Trump's rally was likely an attempt to rally the far-right base, but it seemed to have backfired, as even staunch conservatives are growing wary of the extremism associated with figures like her. 5. Audience members fainting again. Trump's Atlanta debacle also mirrored the fiasco in Pennsylvania in another disturbing way. Audience members were once again seen fainting. Whether due to the heat or the sheer incoherence of the speech, several individuals reportedly passed out during the event. Trump, however, appeared indifferent, once again choosing to focus on himself rather than on the well-being of his supporters. Instead of addressing the concerns of the audience, Trump continued his ramblings, focusing on bizarre and unrelated topics. In a particularly strange moment, he lamented that African American and Hispanic voters who supported Kamala Harris needed to have their heads examined. This statement not only reeked of desperation, but was also offensive to the very demographic groups he has struggled to win over. 6. Liberation Day and more rambling. Perhaps the most alarming part of Trump's speech came when he declared that the United States was an occupied country and that November 5th, 2024, would be Liberation Day. The statement was eerily reminiscent of the language used by authoritarian leaders and dictators, and it raised serious questions about Trump's intentions should he return to power. The notion that America is an occupied country is not only false but dangerous. Such rhetoric serves to inflame divisions within the country and feeds into conspiracy theories that have already led to violence. Trump's repeated use of this language suggests that he is not interested in uniting the country, but rather in stoking the flames of division for his own political gain. By the end of the night, Trump's speech had devolved into a series of rambling, disconnected thoughts. From his praise of Greene to his strange commentary on hydrogen cars, it was clear that the former president was struggling to maintain focus. His once fiery rhetoric had been replaced by incoherent ramblings, and his audience, once loyal and fervent, was now visibly disengaged. Trump's Atlanta disaster was a stark reminder that his political star is fading. What was once a charismatic, albeit controversial, figure capable of drawing massive crowds and dominating the political conversation has now become a man struggling to keep his audience engaged. The mass exodus during his Atlanta speech was not just a sign of a bad night, but a symptom of a much larger issue. Trump's appeal is waning, and his grip on his supporters is slipping. As we move closer to the 2024 election, the question remains, Will Trump be able to regain his footing, or will this Atlanta disaster be remembered as the moment his political career truly began to unravel? One thing is clear. If Trump continues on this trajectory, the path to political liberation may be far more difficult than he anticipates.